It's also one of the busiest MAX stops on the weekends. It also is a direct connection to the popular number 20 Burnside bus, and it's also covered and well lit. So those are some of the reasons. We also heard from residents in our community, in particular, one resident who is disabled and shared with us explicitly how important it is for that station to remain open. And so speaking for her, it poses a lot of hardship if that station is closed. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Old Town neighborhood. So currently, we actually have a joint task force with the Pearl District neighborhood, working with city staff, Joint Office of Homeless Services, to address public safety and livability issues. So closing the Skidmore fountain would actually compound some of the safety concerns that we're working on. So Old Town Community Association, along with University of Oregon, the Salvation Army, and Portland Saturday Market, oppose closing the Skidmore station. And we see it as both unnecessary and unwise. And on the other hand, we want to urge the TriMet agency to take into consideration of the greater good and focus your resources and energy on three things: accessibility, safety, and cleanliness, over closing stations for the sake of saving minutes of commute time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. The next two I have are Kristina Turner and Dr. Tim Mahoney. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, I'm Tina, and I'm the founder and president of the Stadium District Business Association located in Goose Hollow. We represent businesses that surround and are in close proximity to the Kings Hill MAX station. We urge you not to close this stop. This small, very small gain of 30 to 45 seconds is not worth the potential impact to riders. Students of Lincoln High School, business members, and employees in our association rely on this stop, as do visitors visiting Washington Park if they're not on the big pink bus. We have so many projects in development, many based on this area having 3 MAX stops. I've testified before City Council and Design Review many times to bring in and meet the density requirements, and a lot of that testimony is based on the 3 MAX stops, so that will not help when we lose one. So we encourage you not to close this stop. At the very least, we'd like you to shelve the idea of closing this stop and maybe revisit in the next 3 to 5 years for safety, security, and overall density reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tim Mahoney. I'm the immediate past president of the Oregon Society of Artists, which has a organization halfway between the Multnomah Athletic Club and Washington Park. And I'm here to express our concern, the concern of the Oregon Society of Artists, as well as the Goose Hollow Neighborhood Association, or Business Association, regarding the closure of the MAX station at the corner of Jefferson and Salmon. We're roughly 3 blocks west of Jefferson and Salmon. We have an organization of 750 members. We're a 90-year-old organization, the oldest visual arts organization that's community-based in Oregon. And we've been in our place in Park Place for approximately 60 years. And we have 17 instructors. We have 18 exhibits per year. We have 18 workshops per year, and we would be very adversely affected by the closure of that station. We have 20 parking slots serving our building. We have very limited and increasingly limited parking on the street, and it would be a hardship for our members who are increasingly getting used to using public transportation to get to the Oregon Society of Artists. So we strongly encourage you to visit that problem with organizations like ourselves in mind, and we hope that it stays open.
Great. Thank you both for coming.
Hey, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The next two are Alison and Elvin and David Davis. Oh, thank you.
Sorry, I only have one.
So I start. Good morning. My name's Alison Alvin. I'm a Goose Hollow resident, and I'm here to state my opposition to the Kings Hill Max station closure. I sent an email to the board last month, but I wasn't able to come. So I'm going to read part of that letter. And I also opposed the Skidmore Fountain, but I believe Helen said some pretty good points, so I'm going to focus on the Kings Hill. So I use the Kings Hill station almost daily. I use it to commute daily to work. I also use the stop for Max for regular errands, appointments, travel to the airport, getting around Portland, and friends and family come visit me by using this Kings Hill stop. I not only use the station due to its proximity to my home, but it's also safer and more secure. There's several issues with both the Providence Park and Goose Hollow stations. First off, Providence Park tends to attract a large crowd around the station. It's not very well lit, and I feel really unsafe getting there. I specifically avoid this station. At the moment, there's a bunch of construction on both sides. The stretch of 18th Avenue between Morrison and Jefferson is dark and deserted. There's no retail that's open to the time. There's currently a lot of construction going on, and there's several alcoves in front of buildings where I see transient people sleeping. I feel very uncomfortable walking along the stretch both in daytime and nighttime. Secondly, the Goose Hollow station is an additional about 5 to 10 minutes of walking for me. And the station's also dark and deserted, especially on the south-westbound platform, which backs up to a dark green space. So the Kings Hill station, being an island station, provides a good sight line. I can see both behind and in front of me. It's also better lit, and its proximity to Lincoln High School, the Mat Club, and the stadium is comforting. Also, since it's an island station where it's not a group of people hanging out there, it makes me feel safer. So I just want to close that there's also a lot of planned construction in the next 5 years in this neighborhood. I provided you with a map of construction. There's about 1,400 units planned for only about 900 spots, 4,000 stadium seats, and 24,000 square feet of retail. So I just really highly oppose this and hope that you reconsider the closure.
Thank you very much for your input. Well done. Mr. Davis.
One second. So I wanted to talk today about the police state aspects of TriMet. I'm from Multnomah County Cop Watch, David Keefe Davis, and you know, TriMet employs one of the biggest police agencies in the area, which encompass 3 different counties. There's little to no oversight. There's no independent police review board. The TriMet is known for targeting the mentally ill. And since you're involved with the police agencies, then the Portland Police are part of TriMet. They're in a settlement agreement with the DOJ, and I think that TriMet needs to be actually brought into the DOJ settlement, since you guys are in violation of the DOJ settlement through employing Portland Police and other various police agencies that target the mentally ill. And also G4S Security, which are your other main security people, they target the mentally ill. So, you know, you're using other proxy security agencies, which are actually mercenary firms. G4S are one of the biggest mercenary firms. They do all the checkpoints in Palestine, the Israeli checkpoints. They train in counterinsurgency. They're a mercenary firm like Blackwater. They've changed their name 3 times already. Their last name change was Wackenhut, which is directly tied to the Bush family and others. And, you know, so you guys have a bunch of mercenaries and out-of-control cops running around, targeting homeless people, targeting the mentally ill, and there's no oversight. Is there any oversight agency that I can contact when there is issues with TriMet security, whether it's G4S or others other than customer service? No, there isn't, right? You guys can feel free to answer any of these questions or do the no comment, which is what I would expect from criminals under interrogation. So you guys need to clean up your act And I hope that you guys are pulled into the DOJ settlement since you're directly involved with targeting the mentally ill, homeless. I've seen numerous accounts, and I have plenty of it on video. I've seen TriMet people assault women that are like 90 pounds, like a 300-pound TriMet security guy pushed a lady and called her a whore. And that's the type of rampant, vicious stuff you guys got going on, you know, where you have mercenaries and transit inspector guys that have no oversight. And you guys are going to get yourself into the DOJ settlement here pretty soon. Watch. I'm going to go talk to federal judge Michael Simon and try and make that happen. So
Great, Mr. Davis. Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you. All right, the next two I have are Eric Swenson and Howie Beerbaum.
Is
Please.
it on? Thank you, board members and staff, for the opportunity to address you. I'm the current board chair for the Portland Saturday Market, and I'm coming here to speak in opposition to the closure of the Skidmore Max Station stop. And I'm going to speak to it from a personal anecdote. So our organization is described as the economic engine in the Old Town Chinatown neighborhood. And I've personally been working down there for the last 15 years. And I used to work overnight on Saturday and Sunday. And at the time, our organization, we had our information booth under the Burnside Bridge there, and we had our market under the Burnside Bridge as well. And we have since moved across the river. And so the only organization and entity that activates that area is the TriMet Max stop. And we've seen such a huge increase in the more entrenched problems in the neighborhood, and it's really focused right there under the Burnside Bridge. And I run a business down there in addition to being on the board, and we hear constantly about people's safety concerns from, my own personal business is customers, but also at the information booth. And my biggest concern is that if that station does go away, the entrenched problems that we've seen only get worse in the last 8 years are going to get really out of control. And in the past, we've had a really good working relationship with TriMet as we moved across NATO Parkway to our new site, and the TriMet security that help us in the summertime when our volume is the highest. They've been very good at helping us kind of maintain order in that area. And well, I would just hope that as we move forward with the growth of the city and all of our targets, that we can still try to keep that Old Town neighborhood vital and active, because that area always seems to lag behind all of the other efforts that go towards Old Town. And I feel like for our organization to remain vital, for us to serve the community and the public and all of our tourists that come to visit, that station is really key to us. And we provide free validation for the Smart Park or a free TriMet pass to all of our customers that purchase $25 or more for any of our vendors. And so as you all are considering, ways to, meet your budget targets and everything, I hope that you will consider keeping that stop open for the Old Town Chinatown neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask
Go
just
ahead,
a
question.
really quick question? Our time is tight, so it's
Sure.
going to be really quick. You referenced that if the station were closed, it would kind of exacerbate the entrenched problem. Can you just articulate that really quick of how you see that happening?
Sure. So I started working on the site crew for the Saturday Market back in the early 2000s, and we had our storage vaults under the bridge there. In addition to our information booth, it's actually built into the bridge there. And so our site crew and our private security was able to move folks on that would, sit under the bridge there yeah. And so, we would have a couple of folks, on normal circumstance, and in the rainy weather, we would get more folks down there, but it was a very different climate, It was a lot easier to talk to folks, and Now things have gotten really, I would say, a lot more dangerous. You know, like we get threats, and it's a lot more dirty down there, and it's always full. I mean, always full, you know, of folks. I mean, it's lined up. And I know that, you know, that also reflects kind of the bigger challenges that the city itself is dealing with. So I understand that absolutely. My concern is that if the station closes, those problems that are currently the worst I've seen in 15 years are only going to get worse. And if TriMet doesn't have an active station there, that we won't have the support of the TriMet security. And I mean, our private security has no jurisdiction there. So, I mean, there's no way to address, you know, the concerns that we have and the things that happen.
Got it. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Good morning. My name's Howie Bierbaum, Acting Executive Director of the Portland Saturday Market. I'm here again to speak to the urgency of not closing Skidmore Fountains Max Station in an effort to save a couple of minutes of travel time. As a Portland Business Alliance member, Portland Saturday Market agrees with the PBA Transportations Committee's recommendation to close the bus malls Southwest 4th and 5th Avenue stations since they're a block away from the Pioneer Square stops. But I'm here primarily to speak to the proposed closure of the Skidmore Fountain stop. TriMet's analysis claims it's among the bottom 4 stops in terms of usage and is therefore worthy of being cut. But this ignores the fact that it's the second busiest stop on weekends because of the Saturday market. I hope you're aware of some of the history regarding Saturday market and its partners. The city of Portland, through Prosper Portland and Portland Parks and Rec, have spent millions of dollars to enhance the Skidmore market area as a major tourist destination. And one of the reasons Saturday Market decided to stay in Old Town is precisely because there is a Max stop there. Taking away this stop is tantamount to breaking a promise to the city of Portland and Portland Saturday Market's 250 small businesses. And it's not just Saturday Market that will be impacted. Other businesses include the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine, Airbnb, Mercy Corps, the University of Oregon, and the Salvation Army. I want to point out that the Portland Saturday Market champions TriMet and annually purchases and distributes TriMet tickets to our customers who spend $25 or more at the market. We hope to continue the symbiotic relationship for years to come. While I can appreciate the desire to speed up transit time, other stops outside the downtown core could also be considered if saving a minute or two of travel time is a pressing need. It must be noted, however, that based on surveys from both the Portland Business Alliance and TriMet, safety and cleanliness, not speed of transit, is a top concern and a likely reason ridership may have declined in recent years. In fact, an armed robbery at the Southwest 1st and Oak Max stop on Christmas left 1 man wounded, 2 people in jail, and 1 suspect on the run. Therefore, I urge you to prioritize what's best for the common good of all TriMet riders, not just Nike and Intel, who have pushed for these station closures. This is an issue of equity and accessibility. Once a station is eliminated, it's gone forever, so any closures must be looked at for both their immediate and long-term effects. On both counts, closing the Skidmore stop and the Kings Hill Max stop is misguided and short-sighted, and I trust the TriMet board will ultimately do the right thing and leave both stations open. Thanks for your consideration, and I hope you have in your packets a letter of support for keeping the Skidmore stop open from Commissioner Udaley.
I don't believe I see that, but it could be in my packet here. I'll look.
If you don't have copies, I can share it with you.
We'll track it down. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Both made good comments. Thank you. It's very, very much appreciated. Oh, it's under correspondence. We have it. All right. Liz Paris and Thomas Lauderdale. Just a duet coming up here and we don't know about it? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Liz Paris, and I live in the Goose Hollow neighborhood. I speak in opposition to the closure of the Kings Hill Station. The reason I oppose the closure is threefold. I've lived in the area for about 6 years, and I moved from the Hillside neighborhood. And the first reason is that we expect far more residents in the next few years. You've heard eloquently about that. I attached a development map, the same development map you've gotten already. But just to name a few, the high school is going to be relocated practically adjacent to the stop. The Butler block across the street from the stop, half a block. and then the press block. Those are 500 apartments just by themselves. You're probably saying to yourself, oh, well, people can just walk a few blocks. Well, let me tell you, first of all, you have to be healthy to walk a few blocks, and some of my neighbors are not healthy because they're older or they're disabled. But even if you're healthy, it's kind of a scary neighborhood, particularly at night. I've been assaulted since I moved into the neighborhood, and Southwest 18th, as one of the earlier speakers testified, is a scary place, particularly at night. There's homeless people, there's mentally deranged people, and so walking a few blocks is really not a viable option. In addition to the safety issue, the city fathers have deemed that public transit should be available in the core. They've made parking hard. They've discouraged us from having cars, and it seems inconsistent to now talk about closing a station at a time when we just get denser and denser. So I've provided you with statistics in my written testimony, and I won't bore you with those. But let me close by saying that I just think we're bound to get denser in the Goose Hollow neighborhood. I understand that. We've got a crime problem in the Goose Hollow neighborhood, and closure of the Kings Hill Station at this time is wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lauderdale. Nice
Good morning. My name is Thomas Lauderdale. I live at 728 Southwest 1st, just 2 blocks away between Yamhill and Morrison. On the first floor are the world headquarters of my band, Pink Martini, and I serve on the boards of the Oregon Symphony, or the Oregon Historical Society, and Pioneer Courthouse Square. I've been a TriMet writer since 1982. Mm-hmm. I'm baffled as to why, of all of the issues in which TriMet could be working and spending time, that there's this proposal of closing 4 downtown stops. Does the potential of saving 2 minutes warrant this kind of sort of fixated attention and the cutting of services? My family moved to Portland in 1982 amidst as the downtown comeback was happening, and TriMet was sort of at the front and center of that services. My feeling is that Max has been a grounding presence to downtown. Saturday Market, for example, is another grounding presence. So if you take away a stop, if you take away one of those grounding presences, the city becomes less. I guess I'm really confused as to does the saving 2 minutes, is this really? It just seems crazy to be closing stops, 4 stops for a potential of gaining 2 minutes, and I'm wondering where this sort of energy is coming from. Is it coming from Intel and Nike? Is it in the case of Skidmore, is this an attempt to kind of just sort of not deal with the homeless issue? I don't understand. If it's about efficiency, I would be happy to work on a public relations campaign with you and my band to try to get people to board in a more efficient manner and be quicker about it, so that they don't clog and maybe save time that way. I mean, I just think that of all of the issues facing sort of TriMet and the city, which are one and the same, that we would be cutting services, especially right at the heart of downtown, which is sort of has been the cornerstone, as you said, of Portland, of the Portland sort of modern Portland since the 1970s. Yeah. So, in summation, I guess if it's about saving. If it's about efficiency, I think that I'd be happy to work on a campaign for free to
Nice timing.
yeah.
Nice timing. I want to say to both of you, thank you for your comments, and I do want you to know that we do hear from riders that complain about the time it takes to get through downtown, which then adds to the time to get to other locations across the Portland metro region. So we do want to be as efficient and effective as possible, but your points and the trade-offs are well taken, and so that's why it's not an easy decision to do, and so we appreciate your comment.
Well, I think that Americans really should spend some time abroad where people wait in lines regularly.
Good point. Good point. All right, the next two are Steve Underwood and Dhaniya Solomon. Daniel Solomon? Daniel, okay. Okay. I can't read the writing here for me. I'm sorry.
Can I give my time to him, my son?
Sure, but I'm gonna ask him to do it in 3 minutes. So, so please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Steve Underwood, and I'm representing First Zion Lutheran Church at the corner of Southwest 18th and Salmon. We have 100 active members, and the average age is over 70 years old. Many of them ride the MAX either to service or to evening things like choir practice and board meetings. To remove that stop requires that people over the age of 70 at night walk down 18th, walk down Salmon, walk down Jefferson from one of the other two stops. And as you've heard before, that is not a nice area. I don't care if you're 30, but if you're 75, like I am, it is not fun. So I request that you please take that under consideration when you think about it. Because with a growing population in the church and a growing population in the area, they've talked about Lincoln High School and all the building that's going on there. It seems maybe to make short-term sense, but in a longer-term sense, it makes no sense whatsoever. Something else. I'm sure that this stop is under consideration for closure because it has a small population. But some of that is TriMet a self-fulfilling prophecy. 38 days of the year, you close that station when there's a Thorns game or a Timbers game. What if the trains that came from the east, from the red line, the blue line, and the green line that come from Happy Valley and Gresham and the airport, that kind of thing, discharged their passengers at the Providence Park station? Those coming from Beaverton and Hillsborough discharged their fans at the Kings Hill station. Then only half the crowded mess that Providence Park station stop becomes, and all the people trying to cross 18th, clog the intersection at Jefferson, spill out onto busy Burnside, all that is cut in half because half those people are now getting off at the Kings Hill station. When the game is over, the exact same thing happens. If you got off at Providence Park from the east, you get on at Providence Park and go back east. If you come in from the west, you get on at Kings Hill and you go back to the west. Again, cutting the service, the disaster at Providence Park Station in half.
Good suggestion.
That's about 90,000 people over those 38 days. If you assume like 30% of the people ride MAX, and I'm thinking it's probably more than that, but 30% of the people ride MAX. Average attendance at a game is 16,000, 22,000 for the Timbers, and about 11,000 for the Thorns. That's 91,000 people a year who would use that twice, once to get on the train and once to get off the train. Suddenly that station becomes quite busy. Pretty peak timing.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Yeah.
Oh, you only have one thing to offer, and that's service. If you cut service, it seems to be counterproductive to what you are offering this community. Service, and you're removing 4 stations that provide the service that you tout.
Thanks. Mr. Solomon.
Yes, my name is Daniel Salomon. I am on the autism spectrum. I have a Section 8 housing voucher. I am low income, and I have to rely on public transportation, and I live in Goose Hollow also. In an anthology called Liberation Science, putting science to work for social and environmental justice, I found 2 relevant articles to this discussion about closing MAC stations. One article is entitled, Between a Rock and a Green Place, Exploring the Relationship Between Green Consumerism and Social Justice. In this article, the author makes the claim that an ecological lifestyle which excludes and further marginalizes those of us at the margins of society is just another type of consumerism because it leads to social inequity, something which the author calls green consumerism. For example, it is both green consumerism and inequitable to close the MAC stations to someone like myself who lives on the margins of society and has to rely on public transportation just to encourage commuters to do their share and use climate-sustainable public transportation to get to work. This proposal is a classic example of green consumerism at the expense of social equity. This proposal is messed up. This proposal is a bad idea. The other article is entitled, We Need More Than 30 Trees, The Case for Urban Forestry, which I contend also applies to this conversation about public transportation. The author states, planting trees and caring for the urban forest is a way to rally the poverty-stricken around a positive, healthy future. These activities can help lower high asthma rates, provide jobs for local youth, reduce crime, and increase energy saving. Trees are not an end in themselves. They provide the means to save lives. As a person on the autism spectrum who is low income, accessible public transportation not only meets my basic needs and opens doors of opportunity. Accessible public transportation also gives me the opportunity to contribute to society and the planet as I am able, through giving me the opportunity to do my share in terms of building a sustainable future around the world. It is not just the Kings Hill MAC station which is at stake, but also the Skidmore Fountain Station and Pioneer Square South Station, meaning if all 3 stations all close, this would increase my commute time. Who gets to determine whose needs are most important? This is anti-democratic. We need to strike a win-win balance where everyone's needs are met. With a little imagination and a willingness to engage in conflict resolution, I fervently believe that a win-win solution which everyone can live with is possible.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. So I have Sherry Solomon and Stephen Solomon on here, and I think, Sherry, you gave up your time, but I want to read what you say is, keep Kings Hill stop in addition to the others, need more, not less public transportation. I think it's a fairly good summary of what you've been doing. Stephen Solomon, did you want to come up? And maybe I could ask Keith Schultz to come up also. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing me to testify against the proposed closure of the Kings Hill Salmons Station Max Station. My technical background includes over 39 years with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, with a presidential detail to the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the Congressional Office of Technology Assessment, where we employed computer modeling for complex technologies and solicited comment from a widespread audience representing licensees, industry, and environmental groups, federal and state agencies, and the public. I fully support the in-depth letter from Michael Mahaffey, president of the Goose Hollow Foothills League, dated October 18th, 2019, to Thomas Markoff, the Director of Public Affairs at TriMet. The letter recited a large number of reasons in opposition to the proposed closure. I gave a copy to the clerk at the December 12, 2018 public comment period, so it's already on the record. My observations are that the current computer system is outdated because it is not demand-based. Therefore, it stops at the Kings Hill station whether or not any passenger enters or leaves the car. A demand-based system would continue moving if there was no passenger activity that required the train to stop. In my mind, the Silicon Forest computer folks should be able to design such a system for Portland, since they would be a primary beneficiary of a more efficient and equitable system. Participation by industry in taking the lead is not unknown. Recently, Microsoft is reported to offer $500 million to Seattle to overcome its affordable housing crisis. So Silicon Forest could do the same here. Such an initiative would put Portland on the cutting edge with regard to public transportation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keith, nice to see you without your raincoat.
Yeah, well, I had my raincoat, but I didn't get here early enough to get it on. So
Oh, okay.
yeah. Okay, yeah, all you guys remember me. Good morning, everyone. I've been in front of you most every month for a few years now. And 2 weeks ago, I joined the growing membership of people experiencing homelessness. And I know I'll admit I made a few mistakes which put me there. And my second night out on the streets, I spent the night on the new 24-hour transit line, line 20. It was the only way I had to keep warm. So I took a couple of trips from Gresham to Beaverton with a few other people doing the same thing I was. We were just trying to stay warm. And I was able to rest a little bit. And, well, on one trip, the bus broke down right up at the top of the hill there where you go into the tunnel there.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I found out later that they determined it was caused by a faulty fuel pump. And then another bus was sent out, and we arrived about 45 minutes late to the Beaverton Transit Center. And at that point, I overheard a conversation between the supervisor and the bus driver concerning those of us staying warm on the bus. This is the first time I've heard of something written in the TriMet code that passengers must have a destination. I guess that night I had two destinations, Gresham Transit Center and Beaverton Transit Center. And thanks to my alliance with Opal and Bus Riders Unite, I have a place to rest since that night, and I have possibilities on finding a new home. Thank you.
Good, Keith. Thank you for coming. All right, so the last two I have signed up is Reverend Don Hines, if I'm reading it correctly, and Barbara Wrench. Are they here?
It's Dan Hughes, Reverend
Dan Hughes. Okay, thank you very much.
Excuse my handwriting.
That's all right. I just need stronger glasses, I think.
Oh, it's okay.
And is Barbara Wrench here? Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Great, thank you. Dan, I can ask you to, you can go ahead and start if you.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, thank you for hearing me out today. There is quite a few Goose Hollow residents that gave a good account for the necessity of the Kings Hill Station, and I'm here representing Zion Lutheran Church. We are located on the corner of Southwest 18th and Salmon in the Goose Hollow neighborhood, and the Kings Hill stop is just right there. You know, right there, pretty much right in front of our church. And our members take advantage of that. They come and it makes our church accessible for them so that they can come and worship on Sunday, so they can, as Steve Underwood mentioned, that they can come to choir practice on Thursday night. They can also come to other events. Closing that station would impact them directly. It would make them potentially unable to come or finding other means of transportation. Some of my members live in Legends, which is a building right there. And they have expressed concern also about the Kings Hill stop being closed, not only because of mobility issues, but also because of safety concerns. I admit at night, I actually, when I first moved to Portland, I lived in the building over on Jefferson, the new one there, and that stop right there on Jefferson, at night, it doesn't seem like the safest place. I always made sure I held my family close at that stop. And the same with the Providence Park stop. So I can understand their concerns about going out at night and having to take an alternative MAX stop for that. Also, thinking about MAX, I think about the MAX itself as promoting accessibility. And I think that closing these few stops for the sake of efficiency might sacrifice that accessibility. And it'll directly impact our members, particularly one who rides the MAX faithfully every single Sunday, and she has an onset of dementia. And so this routine is very important for her to avoid confusion. So there's all kinds of stories like that we could tap into for the necessity of that station and perhaps the other ones remaining open. But my primary concern is the Kings Hill stop because it affects our congregation directly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Barbara?
I have a master's in public administration degree.
Maybe you could bring her microphone a little closer to her there so we can hear.
I have a master's in public administration degree, so I know how to analyze a budget. I do get the TriMet budget printed out at the Central Library, and I find some interesting things that concern me. There is a department called Public Affairs, Communication and Marketing, with 5 subdepartments, 30 administrators, and a budget of $134,923,266. $134 million. What does this department do? Quote, we bolster TriMet's reputation and brand, but it is the purpose of a business to make the public want more of its public product or services, while every jurisdiction that TriMet goes near already wants more and better public service. At the same time, the Department of Bus Transportation, which everybody already wants, has a budget of only $129,378,908. How many buses are there? Well, I used to be able to ride the bus, but I have bad arthritis, and they are now shaking themselves to pieces. So there is not enough money in the bus maintenance budget. So I suggest that some of the money, some of the $134,922,266 be transferred from the department called Public Affairs, Communication and Marketing, which is totally unnecessary, to the bus maintenance budget. Why are so few people concerned about this? Because here I am complaining, how come it's only me? Perhaps it's because TriMet also has a Department of Legal Services, which has 8 specialists, 13 administrative positions. Sorry.
Sorry, keep going, but I'll ask you to wrap up when you.
And a budget with 3 numbers, $1,966,714 and $2,336,196, and then a smaller one. Why does it have so much in its legal budget? What is it afraid of? I think they should put more money in transportation planning as well. Because my husband and I lived in the Lincoln Tower, and the Max that headed from downtown Portland went straight across a deep geological divide in the earth, and they ignored it. They should have built a well-designed bridge across that the TriMet tracks, which are heavy and vibrate, could cross instead of just ignoring it, because it is often needing repair now. And the route from Lincoln Street to the south goes within 10 feet of the foundation of that building.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, Barbara.
Okay. We had to move out because the 3-level parking garage was starting to crack, because the Max took that route.
Good.
Which caused us a great deal of financial loss. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Two things again I want to stress. I really appreciate the people coming in talking about the stop closures. I think it's fair to say that we haven't heard too many people come in testify in favor of any of the closures of any of the stops, which I think is probably not a surprise. I'll ask the general manager maybe in his comments to kind of give us an update of where we are and the timing, where ultimately the decision will come before the board. And so if you guys want to stick around for a moment, we can get something from him on that. The second thing is I want to say on the budget, Barbara, I would, maybe we can get somebody on staff to go over the budget with you a little bit so you understand what's in each one of those bit large items that you see there. Because I think if you look at the money we're putting into service, that's where the vast majority of our money goes. So I appreciate you looking at the budget, but I think we need to help maybe understand some of the sub accounts that are within all of those items that you mentioned. So again, thank you. That's going to conclude the public testimony today. Again, thank you again all for coming.
My business card has my email address.
All right.
I will expect
Great.
to get emails
Thank you.
from somebody.
Maybe I can ask one of the staff to get that from you. Thank you. All right. So with that, I'm going to, as I said, close the public hearing and call the regular business meeting of the TriMet Board of Directors for January 23rd, 2019 to order. And we're going to go right to the board reports first. I'm going to ask Director Baumann to give us an update on the Committee on Accessible Transportation.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. The Committee on Accessible Transportation met last week on June 16th. They had a very full agenda. I'm going to give you a few highlights of that meeting. The CAT passed a couple of resolutions related to some design issues. First, they addressed the design of bridge plates for the new Type 6 light rail vehicles. The bridge plates are deployed when the doors of a light rail vehicle are open, and they, not surprisingly from the name, bridge plate, they cover the gap between the vehicle and the platform. Federal regulations require a side barrier on bridge plates, but TriMet in the past has received an exemption from that side barrier requirement. And at the meeting last week, CAT passed a resolution again to request an exemption from the side barrier requirements for the new series of light rail vehicles. The CAT also addressed a design matter related to the Max Red Line extension at Gateway. Two of the features at Gateway will be a new platform and a new ADA path that will provide ADA access to the new Gateway Green Park. In order to provide access to the park, the platform will have a slope of 3%, and that's slightly greater than the federal ADA regulations, which require that platforms have a 2% slope. So the CAT passed a resolution supporting the 3% slope and requesting an exemption from the ADA requirements. Next, Jesse Stemler of the Division Transit Project gave an update regarding the design of platforms that are going to be built on the Division corridor. Those platforms will be designed to safely accommodate both pedestrians entering and exiting buses and bicyclists traveling in the existing right-of-way. The CAT addressed two matters related to lift service. The first was adopting new policies for unattended lift passengers, and the second was adopting new policies to address passenger no-shows. Next, Eileen Collins, the manager of lift service delivery, reported on lift operations, and one significant statistic is that lift ridership has decreased by about 7% in the past year. She said that most of that decrease in ridership is attributed to the closing of sheltered work sites. A number of lift passengers use Lyft to get to work, and these sheltered work sites are closing all over the state, and that's resulting in reduced ridership. So the Lyft service is working on efforts to serve those customers in other ways. Finally, Steve Hext of Broadway Cab reported significant improvements in trip dispatching over the past few months when Broadway Cab transports Lyft customers. That's the report.
Yeah. Sounds like you had quite a meeting there.
We did.
Yeah, thank you. Any questions for Director Bauman? Seeing none, why don't we move on to the Finance and Audit Committee, Director Stovall?
Good morning. We covered 4 items in the Finance and Audit Committee this morning. And the first item we covered, we looked at potentially one of the items that's going to come before the board this morning in regards to additional credit line access for cash flow. So that's an item we're going to cover more in depth this morning as we move to the board's agenda. The second item we covered was to look at the transition from our paper tickets and historical utilization of these paper tickets to moving to more of the hop pass in that regard. And so kind of looked at some potential timelines and impacts in regards to that. Of course, it's another item that we've been getting updates on. We'll continue to get updates on as we look at what that phase out process and transition process is going to look like. We also discussed the kind of the ridership. The ridership, of course, has financial impacts, and we've talked about the decline of the ridership and some of the things and the potential solutions as we look forward to increase the ridership as we move forward as an agency and organization, and how does that roll into the region's goals in regards to various things, greenhouse gases, and then how do we make sure that we're approaching it from a holistic type of approach. So we took a look at that. And lastly, we discussed what's called a local improvement district, which impacts our 4th bus facility, which we've already talked about in regards to taking over and actually implementing and moving forward with the 4th bus facility, and how the improvements around that 4th bus facility need to occur and how that's going to be financed. So that's some of the costs in regards to the actual surface improvements and some of the other safety improvements required for traffic flow is actually going to be shared by a number of the property owners in the area. And the property owners actually are very supportive of the effort in regards to that 4th bus facility and the improvements needed and desired around that location. Of course, that location is in Northeast. That really pretty much summarizes we've got 2 more committee members who are there, but if I missed something, go ahead and highlight it, but that summarizes the report.
Great. Any questions or additions for Finance Audit? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The next board report was on the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, and we did learn this morning that Director Way is not going to be able to join us, so I assume we will defer that report and move right on to the last report, which is the Transportation Equity Advisory Committee, which also Director Gonzalez is not here today, but we have John Gardner, who can give us a quick update of what happened at the committee. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, President Warner, members of the board. So I'll just do a couple of highlights of what we discussed at this month's TAC meeting. The first thing is it's time for us to update our Title VI program, which we do every 3 years. And as part of that effort, we're going to update TriMet's Language Access Plan. And this is the plan that supports the 13 safe harbor communities that are limited English proficiency riders. So those riders include community members from the Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, including Cantonese and Mandarin, Russian, Korean, Ukrainian, Arabic, Tagalog, Japanese, Cambodian, Persian, Romanian, Somali. So we're going to be engaging in formal community conversations with each one of those communities, the large population for those communities, to understand better how we can serve them, how we can engage them, get their feedback on safety and security issues, explain to them the opportunities available through HOP and the Low-Income Fare Program, and really inform the development of our formal language access plan and how we serve those writers going forward. So we're really excited to begin that in March. And so TIAC discussed how they wanted to participate in that. We also discussed our efforts to reconvene the Safety and Security Subcommittee. I think that came back and related to the feedback you heard this morning. So we will be convening that group in February. We have over a dozen community-based organizations that serve on that as a sounding board that have developed some recommendations that TriMet staff, now that we're supercharged with Executive Director Marla Blagg, will be taking on in partnership with our department to make sure that we're as transparent and equitable as we can be. And one of the things we'll be looking at is a draft report that will describe updated safety and security outcomes as well as fair enforcement outcomes. So that gentleman's welcome to come. That's an open meeting. So we're excited to get that group back together, as well as add more groups. We do have participation from Multnomah County's aging and disability, as well as alcohol and drug and behavioral health communities. So we feel like it's a robust committee. And finally, we discussed, it's been a really good 12 months for TriMet when it comes to equity in terms of what we've done in July in launching the Low-Income Fare Program, our changes to fare policy, our continued success in getting a strong minority utilization in construction projects. So TIAC's really interested in looking at more formal tools that we can use to sort of expand our efforts on inclusion and equity, both inside and outside of TriMet. So they're encouraging me to discuss some opportunities with TriMet's GM in the next few months, who's been the champion of a lot of the work we've done over the last 12 months, to kind of further move that ball down the road. So we're excited for that progress that we've had, but also to keep on going. So overall, it was a great meeting. We had good attendance, and we have a really good group this year in TIAC.
Good. Any questions for John? I have one. What's the kind of the latest number for people taking advantage of the low-income fare program?
We are just a hair below 10,000.
Wow.
So I expect we'll be at 10,000 by the end of the week, and then every month we continue to gain more partners. Just about 10,000 over 30 sites. So we're on course, ahead of where we expected to be, but we have really good partners helping us connect this opportunity to people across the region.
Cool. Thanks for your efforts on that. Appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Okay, that concludes our board reports. I'm going to now turn over to the general manager for his report.
Great. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and Happy New Year to everybody, since this is our first meeting of the year. So just before I move into a couple items I'm going to cover today, just wanted to comment on two things. Firstly, to Thomas, who was one of the speakers earlier today, just a reminder for some of the new board members, just want to thank him because he was actually one of the singers, I understand, at the opening of the Orange Line. And I understand
he and his whole band.
And his whole band was amazing. So I don't know if he's still here or not, but big thank you again for that. In terms of the topic you've heard lots about in terms of the station closures. So we anticipate bringing this back to the board with a recommendation probably in the March or April board timeframe. We're still working on some things behind the scenes. One thing I do want to comment on, and I've heard a couple of times, that this initiative to close station was driven by Nike and Intel. I can absolutely tell you that is not the case. In fact, how unpopular it may be, I'm the one who actually raised this issue myself. So I probably was the one where the energy should go, if anything. So I think we want to take a professional and concerted effort look at this as we see with Clark County, 3 million people coming here in the next 20 years. How do we keep the rapid transit in this region so it stays healthy, vibrant, sustainable, that it can be inclusive for many other people as well as the region continues to grow and densify. So I just wanted to bring that clarity. I think it's unfair to target this at a couple large corporate folks. So I just want to bring clarity to that. So stay tuned for March or April. It'll be all publicly posted as normal for all parties concerned. In terms of my report this morning, this will be a shorter report. My report in December board meeting was a lot longer, so I've got a couple items to talk about this morning. The first one is, again, the monthly ridership. This last period, we carried more than 7.2 million rides in December. The weekly boardings were down about 1.5%. Now, December ridership in particular can truly fluctuate based on clearly a number of factors. For example, Christmas and New Year's each fell on Mondays. And so as people book off holidays and tie into their vacation time, this is not uncommon to see as it goes through sort of that 7-year cycle. They fell on Tuesday, so a lot of people took Monday, the day off before, enjoying a 4-day weekend. For the bus ridership, we provided nearly 166,000 trips per average weekday. That was down about 2%. Peak service was down 1.4%. The weekend service, basically 0.3%, so, basically flat. In terms of the max line, we saw nearly 111,000 trips per average weekday, are down just over 1%. The weekend service was flat. The peak service saw a bit of uptick at plus 1.5%. You can start to see shifting numbers here. And the orange line was up 3.4% year over year, and was down 1.5% on the weekends within that, but overall up 1.5%. In terms of the frequent bus network, some positive news there. That was up 0.5% and 2.3% on the weekends. Wes, you'll notice in your numbers, took a fairly large hit in ridership, down about 19% over the previous year, and that was based on really significant track-related signal work we did where we had to take the system down. What we did do, as an example of trying to be as nimble as we possibly can to help compensate for some of these disruptions, we substitute out one of our regular shuttle buses, and there was a double-decker bus in town, and we said, let's take the risk and let's put this in service and test it and see, in fact, what our customers are thinking. So we did a quick survey while people were using it, and I think the response was extremely positive. And in fact, even driving around the streets, which a double-decker bus like that's not common in this community, even people were giving thumbs up even as it drove around the streets, not even being in service. So I think there was some actually quite interest. So no commitment on current service, but stay tuned for ways for us to look at how we do the business differently overall. So we want to take advantage of the max disruption to see what it was like actually in service environment. That would probably be it on the ridership side of things. You have a table with your packet, the financial statement summary. You've got that in your packet, so I won't spend any time on that unless you had questions, of course. However, I would like to move to the second item, and to me, to really recognize the leadership efforts of really two outstanding partners and friends of TriMet. Specifically, Deanna Palm and Diane McKeel, I believe are in the audience here this morning. And just to let the board and the audience know, when the legislature passed House Bill 2017, it was really clear for us to be able to implement this and pull this off across a complex community of ideas. We needed strong leaders to chair these citizens committees and have leadership from that be well acknowledged from around the region. So from the east in Multnomah County, Diane McKeel, a former Multnomah County Commissioner. And secondly, from the west in Hillsborough, Deanna Palm, the president of the Hillsborough Chamber of Commerce. And the two came together to meet in the middle in downtown Portland to help us all through this complex and passionate conversation. So we were honored to have these two really terrific women lead this committee, and they've been ardent supporters of TriMet and our mission for many, many years. Initially, we thought it would be a relatively straightforward project or initiative and lift. Well, lo and behold, were we ever wrong. And so thanks to 39 committee members, 17 meetings later, Deanna and Diane are still standing. And this dynamic duo led the committee to a near unanimous recommendation on how to allocate money for service improvements, including electric buses, youth pass, and a number of other categories, including amenities. These two threaded all those needles to a complex and at times probably emotionally charged viewpoints and passion, which is good. And they did it for the amazing low pay of $0. So thank you for your volunteerism, your leadership, and their sense of giving back to the community. So with that, I'd like to perhaps, Mr. President, have you present a small token of our appreciation if they would both could come up. And now that'd be terrific. So, and I just ask the audience, and let's all give them a big round of applause for what they've done. Yes, there we go.
So why don't you come around here?
And hopefully, at the end of this, they will say a few words. I really welcome them to each.
Thank you very much.
Okay. You got to pose now. Perfect. Thank you.
So yes, if you'd like to, first off, give you back to these, so you don't. But if you'd like to sit down and make a couple remarks, please do.
Go ahead, Deanna.
Thank you very much. It was a great experience. Want to thank Diane. Thank you. I want to thank Diane for her leadership and allowing me to partner with her, and also the committee members. It was, I think we went to the committee members with a understanding of it would be 2 or 3 meetings, and that changed, but it was all for the good. We had great diversity in terms of experience and interest and advocacy, and it was, I want to thank the staff as well. They prepared us for success through the process, and while we had some twists and turns, they were always able and agile and willing to assist us to move towards getting to the finish line. So a great experience. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. I would say my thank yous too, and working with Deanna was a huge pleasure. I've known her from back in my days when I worked at the Chamber of Commerce in the West Columbia Gorge Chamber. So we've been chamber friends for a long time, and and I've always respected and admired her. So it was wonderful to work with her. I appreciate that we had, you ask us to co-chair from the west and the east part of the region, and appreciate that very much. Certainly the staff was amazing. Tom Mills and Bernie and Tom Marcraft were amazing in preparing us for the meetings, and also in the beginning, I think really listening to the group we had initially kind of grew, and a lot of that came out of the suggestions that the committee gave on whose voices should be sitting at this table. And so I think we had they moved forward with a wonderful representation of the voices of all the area, and so it was, and being a duck, I never minded going to the University of Oregon building for our meetings, for our committee meetings. I always had a little shopping to do, on the duck store. But anyway, thank you very much. It was an amazing opportunity. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you both for your efforts and leadership on this. It's greatly appreciated. I'd ask you both, when do you sleep? Because I know you're both involved in lots of things. So again, it is truly appreciated. Thanks again.
It's a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just the last item, would just to comment to one of the presenters this morning, just particularly around the budget, where they were talking about public affairs budget versus the transportation budget. And I think the dollar amounts allocated for what was deemed to be in public affairs, I think one of the individual's recommendations was in fact to spend more on planning. What might be helpful is in the definition of public affairs, in fact, that is where the planning, a significant part of the planning budget is. So I think their recommendation is to reallocate, I think it's already embedded in there. So just for clarity's sake, Bernie and team do far more than important media, communications, outreach, things of that nature. So significant part is that planning piece. So.
Yeah, maybe you can let her also know the process and the upcoming opportunities for her to provide input on next year's budget.
Yeah, and we will follow up on that as well. So thank you. That would conclude my short report this morning. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for the general manager? Okay, seeing none, let's move right into the next item, which is our consent agenda. And for those in the audience, anybody watching at home, items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member can remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to the consideration of this portion of the agenda. And I'll point out we have 4 items on the consent agenda this morning. The first is the approval of the board meeting minutes for December 12th, 2018. I know Director Simmons and myself have provided changes in those minutes, so I think those are in the latest copy we have, correct? All right. We also have a resolution, or excuse me, we have a resolution directing that reading of all ordinances be by title only. We do have an ordinance, so I'm going to save our general counsel, many minutes of time by having that approved. And then there's a resolution authorizing the transfer of appropriated funds within the current budget we're in, which is really just truing up based on what we actually know the dollars to be now. And then finally is resolution, which is authorizing a modification of contract with G4S Secure Solutions for transit security. And if I'm reading that properly, it's just an extension of time until we come back for a further discussion about long-term contracting through an RFP process that we're concluding. So with that, is there anything on the consent agenda where the board has a question or would like to have an item removed for individual consideration? Seeing none, then, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with the changes on the minutes noted?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, then I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. Well, let's move on then to the first resolution of the day, which is Resolution 19-01-03, which is delegating authority to the general manager to authorize a line of credit or similar financial instrument for the purpose of interim financing capital projects and to finance operations in advance of delayed federal appropriations or delayed or reduced payroll tax revenues, which is very germane with what's going on. Mr. General Manager, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This resolution before you today requires your authorization for a revolving line of credit or similar tool to be used in the event that TriMet's cash flow be diminished by lower than expected federal funds, payroll tax, or I even suggest other significant economic events which may occur from time to time, such as recessions, things of that nature. This particular one in front of you comes on the heels of several contributing factors here. First, TriMet has been waiting actually since July 1st for a $68.5 million payment in overdue funds from the federal government as a result of the current federal government shutdown. And there's also been other shutdowns recently even before this one. So as a result, the agency is exploring options to meet the short-term cash flow needs in January. The requested line of credit provides a temporary source of working capital in the event the federal, state, or local funding is reduced or delayed today or even in the future. Thus, we look at a revolving line of credit. As you consider the resolution, I would like to reference a couple items where TriMet took action in anticipation of funding to keep Oregon moving law. Among them, the deployment last fall of our largest bus expansion in our agency's history, and the implementation also, which John Gardner spoke to earlier about the success of the low-income fare program. All this is part of deploying HB 2017 funding prior to the revenue kicking in, which is anticipated mid-calendar year this year. So to delay those initiatives, I believe we would have put in good faith TriMet and our customers would have been lost a lot of really important time to convert with electrification of the fleet, introduce the successful already low-income fare programs, et cetera. We believe we've made a significant outlay to provide more and better service across the region. In the short term, this is a cash flow issue, what you have in front of you today. It's not a budget issue. We are actually under budget. So we need to make adjustments to address the growing deficit caused by delays in the federal funding. So we've taken the step now, also gives us a tool beyond this current federal government disruption for the future, thus the revolving element of this type of line of credit. Dee Brookshire is here, our CFO, if you have any questions, or myself, and your approval of this resolution is recommended.
Questions for the General Manager or for Dee?
I've got just a quick comment in regards to just some of the language. I mean, as we look at credit lines and lines of credit, and actually Doug just referenced this just moments ago, but it's highlighted a little bit in the resolution. And I've had an opportunity to kind of touch base on this a little bit, but from a line of credit perspective, I mean, we really want to see as an agency it be primarily a timing issue rather than reduction in revenues. And so there's a couple places where it highlights kind of that reduction in the federal disbursements and the reduction in payroll taxes, as opposed to utilizing the line of credit primarily as a timing issue, ensuring that, of course, the concept that comes to mind is deficit spending, where, we actually see a decrease in our revenues and we fund that through our credit line, as opposed to, some of the challenges we may see now or in the future where there's a delay in those revenues. And a delay would even include moving from one fiscal year to another fiscal year. And we know that there's going to be a funding that comes in the next fiscal year, but we've got to make the expenditure now. Hence, what were some of the stuff we're doing, putting more service on the streets in regards to that, and there's going to be some delay in when those revenues are going to come in from either payroll taxes, HB 2017, or from the federal government on grants and things like that. So I just want to highlight that, we've had a discussion. I've had an opportunity to talk to both Dee and Doug in regards to I see a line of credit being primarily a timing issue rather than some type of deficit spending where we don't have the revenues identified coming in at some point in the future.
Two things from my perspective. First off, my assumption is we're not the only agency is starting to deal with this as a result of the government shutdown. So you have any perspective of what's going on around the United States?
Yes, I think you can read in the news already, New Jersey Transit is actually in the process of cutting some of their service back. I am aware of other transit agencies that are experiencing financial challenges right now. I think the longer this drags out, the more exacerbated and the more acute this is going to become, not only for TriMet, but across this nation. So yes, there are other agencies. In fact, I think there's a small one that's actually a very small one that's actually stopped services right now, but they're very small, not in the state of Oregon. So.
And then the last thing I have is really, I guess, just to point out that, so we're approving this action gives you authority to move forward on establishing a line of credit, picking a entity and executing an agreement with them. Can you let us know in writing when you get that done and what the terms are, since since it won't be coming back to us for any further discussion or action, right?
That's correct. Once you've approved this, this allows Dee's team in particular to get to the banking markets, and we will share the key elements of the term sheet with you. Happy to do so.
Perfect, yes.
Related to that, it sounds like there are other transit agencies around the country that may also be doing more borrowing, and perhaps other local government entities as well for the same reason. Is that having an impact, do you know, on interest rates? Is there upward pressure as a result of great demand?
Well, we do believe that we could have gotten better terms on a recent financial transaction, similar to the LOC. That's why we're going out to market. We're actually going to bid this business out next week. But yes, you're right. It's nothing. It isn't something that we can point to and say, yes, that's because of the shutdown. But as you may know, the markets are in turmoil right now. So there's a great deal of volatility at every level.
I guess it makes sense to do this sooner rather than later.
It's going to be a very short RFP period, about 3 weeks.
I might just add on to this. I think this is in times like this where you see the great benefit of TriMet having the only North American AAA rating. I think it is a real testament to Dee and the rest of the team's work that gives us at least access quicker. And I think we've actually seen that on one of the most recent draw on the declining line of credit remaining. So,
any other questions?
Well, I would just say that this was a topic on the Finance and Audit Committee this morning, and there were no concerns or thoughts of this not being something that we should move forward with. So for the rest of the board, we did discuss this at the Finance and Audit Committee, and we're supportive of moving forward with this as a normal course of business. So there were no concerns.
Thank you. Well, with that, then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 19-01-03?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Let's call for the question. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 19-01-03, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, let's move on to the next resolution, which is Resolution 19-01-04, which is amending the Strategic Financial Plan Guideline on Pension Funding. Mr. General Manager, or D?
And I'll introduce it, and Dee will answer all the technical questions and bail me out. So thank you. So this resolution is intended to be a clarifying measure written to prevent misinterpretation of TriMet strategic financial plan specifically on pension funding. The resolution removes the wording related to, and I'll quote, the other post-employment benefit trust being 50% funded in 15 years, and clarifies the intent to continue funding both pension trusts at the current level until both are fully funded. The pensions that are referenced are the bargaining unit pension, as well as the management staff pension plans. The bargaining unit pension is currently funded at more than 80%. The management and staff pension plan is nearly at 93%. The current SFP guideline developed and was adopted actually July 1st, 2014, and reads, within 15 years, the pension trust should be fully funded and the other post-employment benefits liability reduced by 50%. Once the pensions are fully funded, the same level of funding should be dedicated to OPEB funding until the OPEB funding liability is fully funded. The proposed change is as follows. Within 15 years, the pension trusts, plural, should be fully funded. As the pensions become fully funded, the same level of funding should first be dedicated to funding the remaining pension, and then the same amount as previously invested in both pensions annually should be dedicated to OPEB funding until the OPEB liability is fully funded. There is no immediate financial impact on the organization of this vote, and your approval is recommended.
Dee, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, not really. I think that Doug did a very good job of describing the situation. I just did want to point out that we're talking about $30.5 million. $25 million goes to our union pension trust annually, and $5.5 million goes to our management staff trust. And thanks to a very robust market over the last couple of years, we are expecting that the management trust will be fully funded within the next 2 years, possibly sooner, if things could settle down. And then that $5.5 million should go to the union trust. So we would have the full 30.5 going into the union trust until it is fully funded. And it wasn't exactly clear in the original language that that was the intent. So this is just clarification for staff.
Dr. Stowell?
Two quick questions in regards to once the pension plan is fully funded, how then do we manage those funds differently? Because part of the reason why we have the opportunity to fund them at 95% is because they continue to grow, essentially. But once they get to 95%, do we take more of a, and this is kind of a broad question, do we take more of a conservative approach with those funds so they're not exposed to market risk?
That is a consideration. Right now, we have a very aggressive plan.
Correct.
Most of our current employees are covered with this, but it was a younger group. And now as they approach retirement in the DB, Defined Benefit Plan, which is what these pension trusts cover, we would want to maintain at least 95%. We expect that even if we changed it to more conservative allocations, instruments, then we would still, we're still going to fluctuate between that 95% and 100%. So we will still be looking at that.
But, I mean, as we hit that 95, if we go less aggressive, then that reduces our market risk exposure so that we don't see a 20% drop in our overall net assets, which could happen if a market, so our allocation would get probably more conservative because we don't need to be as aggressive. The other question is, I know historically we've been unable to look at more aggressive returns on the OPEB side of things. Is that still in place, that we can only access very conservative limited markets with our OPEB dollars as opposed to our pension dollars?
That is still the case, and that's when the Strategic Financial Plan guidelines were developed, that was the case. And so the decision was made by the board to focus on funding the pension trusts first, because the investment options are so broad, so much broader.
Correct.
We could actually go into equities that we couldn't on the way the OPEB legislation is written. So just the 267, actually it's not 267, but the legislation that covers investment options was already changed to cover pension trusts. And what we're still trying, I mean, Aaron and Bernie are working very hard to add that to the list and make sure that we get it through this year to change the investments. I believe they have at least 3 years to do that. So.
Got it. Appreciate that.
Other questions? I guess just a comment I would make. I want to acknowledge former board member Greg Prosser and Director Stovall for helping put together the strategic financial plan that really has driven us to where we are. And for the new board members, this is, when you think about this, we're a public agency that actually can talk about in the next few years having our pension funds for both management and represented fully funded. And when I talk to legislators about the things that we've done, they just can't believe it, because obviously we're dealing with PERS and other things that are not as healthy as this. So I just want to acknowledge the work that was done a few years ago to get us to this point and to allow us to then, after those are fully funded, to start attacking the OPEB liability. So great work. I just have to say that as a preface for, again, making these minor changes, but clarity on the strategic financial plan. So thanks.
And I would also like to comment that this strategic financial plan and also the debt ceiling have played a very significant role in 3 rating agencies giving TriMet a AAA rating. So,
And I do want to touch base on, as was just referenced, I was part of the original group that helped put together the strategic financial plan, and its intent was that it give us kind of that overarching longer-term guidance so that we have kind of the North Star to continue to look at and have us guided in the strategic financial plan. And similar to what Dee just referenced, it's externally, it's also been well received. And again, Director Prosser did a phenomenal job in guiding this process. It was just a joy to work with him and the rest of our staff and team in developing this. And it was designed in a way so that we did have the flexibility to make these slight adjustments as we moved along. I mean, it wasn't something that was set in stone, because we knew that there were going to be potential things that would change or adjust. But it was, the strategic financial plan was developed in a way that it would look at and require the board's input as we make these changes. And I am fully supportive of the changes we're looking at here. I think this is the right and appropriate change as we continue to move forward and adjust the plan as needed to meet the overall, the outcomes that the agency desires to achieve. So, as one of the individuals that was there when we originally drafted, I'm fully supportive of this change.
With that, then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 19-01-04?
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, it gives me great pleasure to call the question on this one. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 19-01-04, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved unanimously. Again, good work on everybody's part on this one.
thank you.
All right, well, let's move on to the next agenda item, if I can get to it here, is Resolution 19-01-05, which is authorizing contracts with Aramark Uniform and Career Apparel LLC for UniFirst Corporation and UniFirst Corporation for maintenance, uniform rental, and laundry services. And it says 3 lots, so that's because there's 3 different locations, right? So, Mr.
Yeah, there's 3 different batches of an award, not necessarily geographic in nature. So we'll just maybe call up, Nate Griffin's here, which is terrific, and I don't know if Roland wanted to join as well, but okay, I think we're in good hands with Nate. So, Mr. President, members of the board, this arrangement is specified in TriMet's working and wage agreement. The contract expires mid-March, and we issued an invitation to bid to select contractors for these services. And we received 3 bids and selected 2 vendors, Aramark and Career Apparel. Neither business is certified, in these recommendations, but Aramark's workforce is nearly 47% minority. It's 38% female, and there are 263 employees just at the Portland facility alone. UniFirst workforce is nearly 59% minority and 44% female, and the company's a little bit smaller employees, just under 100 employees. The proposed contracts are recommended for a 5-year term with no rate increases allowed during the initial term and permitted only with TriMet approval in years 2 through 5. The total of all the contracts is $2.09 million, but will vary annually according to what consumption and demand are based on at each location. I would note that the total was more than 13% less than TriMet's independent cost estimate, what we had thought about going in for the procurement. So seems like a pretty healthy market out there. They are budgeted for and also allocated. They get allocated into based on consumption to the various maintenance departments. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and recommendation is requested.
Questions for General Manager or staff? Seeing none, then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 19-01-05? I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 19-01-05, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Nate.
Let's move on to Resolution 19-01-06, which is authorizing contracts with Stellar Services, Inc. for enterprise content management software and implementation services.
Terrific. Thank you. Yes, the Records Governance Initiative, as the board has heard before, is a multi-year phased-in effort, very complex. The contract before you this morning is for the third and final phase of this project. Phase 3 began in 2017 when TriMet engaged in a thorough selection process to procure an enterprise content management system. The experts are sitting right in front of you, plus to my left, and Shelley Devine's been instrumental in helping move this forward. The process involved research, demonstrations, interviews, multiple layers of evaluation and reevaluation. A competitive RFP, or request for proposal, resulted in 10 responses. An evaluation committee was made up of staff from a number of firms, including engineering and construction, finance administration, our IT, information technology group, of course, legal divisions were all involved in the vetting and review of these important proposals. Three leaders emerged. Through the additional reviews and interviews, presentations, Stellar was ultimately determined to represent the best value for TriMet. Their workforce is comprised of 37% women and 91% minorities. The company will also not be subcontracting any of the work for this contract. We'll be doing it directly. The maximum amount of the contract award is $2.8 million over an 8-year period. The amount also includes funding for the first 4 task orders and 8 years of maintenance and licensing. The initial amount is included in the fiscal 19 budget. Future budgets will come before you, of course. Future maintenance and licensing will be included in IT's budget on a going forward basis, so you'll see that come forward for fiscal 20 and beyond. Stellar, we believe, is a well-qualified firm for this work, and your recommendation is requested. So we have some very talented people here with Donna May and Kim Akamoto. I think we have a presentation to cover off with you, so I'm going to turn it over to you and then back to the board.
Great. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. Today we seek board approval of a resolution that would authorize the procurement of an enterprise content management platform and implementation services. To facilitate that process, we've put together a short presentation that will provide a high-level overview of the product and the company that TriMet selected, along with our implementation strategy. Enterprise Content Management, or ECM, could be described as TriMet's own online library. It will help TriMet to meet its records governance obligations, from capturing and cataloging records to routing information for decisions, and to final records disposition. The selected product is OpenText, which Gartner, a global research and analysis firm, has recognized as a leader in the content services industry. It is also DoD 5015.2 compliant, so it meets state requirements for electronic records management systems. So here are some key product highlights. First, OpenText has a pre-built integration into Oracle's e-business suite, which will enable us to link the system into our existing database applications and leverage the information that is stored there. The OpenText Capture Center offers enhanced scanning, so when a record is scanned into the ECM, the system can automatically detect and pull key pieces of information from that document. This will help reduce the need for manual entry and help to improve data quality. Through automated workflows, we can streamline the movement of content across teams, eliminate redundant steps, and also provide some insight into process bottlenecks and missed deadlines. TriMet has a strong business need to collaborate with our jurisdictional partners, contractors, and other external parties. OpenText offers multiple ways to do this, including the use of a free tool called TempoBox, which allows the controlled sharing of ECM content. Ease of use is an important factor that will aid user adoption. To that end, OpenText offers two user interface options. The modern interface provides personalized workspaces so staff can quickly access their favorite files and see their open tasks at a glance. There's also a classic interface for those who are more comfortable with the file tree structure that we use today. This familiar environment may help to ease staff into this new change. And finally, we're a mobile society, so staff has a need to access records outside of the traditional brick and mortar workspace. Well, OpenText has an app for that. TriMet has selected Stellar as its ECM implementation partner. Stellar has over 20 years of experience providing IT consulting services to over 1,000 government agency clients. They've supported over 100 capital projects and also have experience in other industries, including transportation, energy, and education. They are also a certified minority business enterprise, which is in line with TriMet's long-standing commitment to diversity. So now I'd like to turn things over to Donna Mae Scheiduk, our ECM project manager, who will brief you on our implementation strategy.
Thank you. The ECM will start with a very small pilot project that will bring greater awareness of this technology across the agency, but only will impact a small group to begin with. Once we have achieved success with this group, we'll move across to the different departments. As part of our organizational readiness, we'll begin working with teams months in advance to assess, prepare, and communicate the changes that will be forthcoming. Change management is a key part of our implementation strategy. As such, we have sent a couple of folks from the TriMet staff in for training and certification in ECM, and also have vendors on board that are experienced in this area. The ECM is considered a foundational platform for the agency. So in partnership with Stellar and our internal team, we will work together to understand the requirements and then design, build, test, and deploy this solution as a unified team to support knowledge transfer. In addition, our budget has called out for $200K in structured classes to provide additional training for our business and IT teams. So what does this look like from a roadmap perspective? First, we'll start with system provisioning. This will allow us to buy the software and the hardware, and that will be in place in March. In addition, we will provide system overview training for our IT team. Next, we'll move on to the benefits team. This is our pilot project. The benefits team is only 10 people, but the documents and the content that is created with this group impacts all current staff and retirees. The key benefit here is it will help us provide better security around our PII and HIPAA-related content. Our second business unit group that is up will be our legal services contracts team. Here we'll bring on IGAs, leases, and revenues, and contracts, and this will help set the foundation for self-service, permission-based access to contracts. And then the last group in our implementation team will be the accounts payable. This will be deployed over a 3-phase process. What this will do is help improve the efficiency in how documents are scanned, reviewed and approved, and processed for payment. So the team here has spent many years leading up to this point, and we are super excited about entering into our implementation phase. Our intent is to come back in a year and share with you the key achievements that we have performed underneath these first 4 task orders. But before we go, we wanted to know if there was any questions or comments from the board.
Good. Thank you.
In implementing such a program like this, have you started developing data standards so that when input is needed by staff, people are inputting it the same way?
Yeah. So when we think about the shared drive project that we have, that is a process of understanding the data and starting to do the cleanup. When we actually prepared the RFP, we spent a considerable amount of time with each of the business units, understanding the content and beginning to develop that taxonomy.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Is your question? Oh, I'm sorry, Keith.
My question is, would the classic user interface be phased out over time? And what period of time would that be, if so?
So the way that OpenText has designed the software, it's really a user choice. This software program has been out in the marketplace for many decades. So they purposely built the platform in a way that their older customers didn't have to migrate to the modern platform if they weren't ready. So in our implementation, we'll actually work with the business users, and if some want the modern user face, they can have it. If others prefer to use their email and the classical click and drive down the folder structure, it's really up to the end user.
Thank you.
I want to comment on the very detailed description of the procurement process that you included. That clearly a lot of effort and excellent thought went into this, so thank you for all of that. So this is an 8-year contract with Stellar. Is there a proprietary element to it that will tie us to Stellar after 8 years, or is it possible that another vendor could pick this up?
So Stellar is the implementation partner, and one of the key advantages with OpenText is they have hundreds of implementation partners across the United States and Canada and the globe. So should there be any issues in the partnership with Stellar, we can go out and find other partners that are certified to help us with the system.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? I was curious, I'm just looking at how the organization's doing with this change now. Is it feeling good about the migration now, or you still have people going, why am I doing this? And I like the way I'm doing it now.
There will always be some who take a little more time to bring along, but now that we're finally here, I think they're seeing the connection as to how the shared drive cleanup, how we're trying to better organize our records and utilize this new tool that will bring more capabilities where they can find the things that they need to do their work and streamline their processes and save time that they can devote to higher value tasks. So I think we're getting there.
We can clearly see when we have an early adopter. Just yesterday, we had a group of folks come hit us up through the RGL network and say, we hear this new initiative is taking place. We're working on developing forms. We want the workflow process. Can we have some time with you guys to understand what's going on and figure out when we can fit into the roadmap? So we're definitely seeing an awareness across the organization.
So that's kind of my next question is the business process part of this. You're just getting into that right now. And
Correct.
so that's where I always found it, having gone through a couple of these, that's where you really get the benefit is by people realizing they can streamline, do things differently than they never, in ways they hadn't before. So so that's part of this next phase and a pilot to learn how
Absolutely. So the pilot will give us an opportunity to showcase how the tool works, and it'll be a selling tool as we work across the groups. But when we think about the implementation approach and the strong partnership with Stellar and our IT team, it's really about understanding the requirements, and then as part of that design, it'll be a joint design effort. And as part of that, they do prototyping, right? So you'll actually get to see how your documents are entering into the system, how you can find them, what a workflow looks like before those designs get solidified.
Perfect. I might just, a couple comments I might add here is, firstly, I just want to, someone who's not here present but is in the room is Tim McHugh, and I really want to give him a lot of credit and the IT team, because it really takes, for those who've worked on these before, takes a partnership. And IT is often hidden in the back room when they deserve to be really prominent in helping all of us through this. But I would also add that this is only one part of where, as over the next 5 to 10 years, as the agency grows and ages, a lot of our systems, some are sunsetting, some need to get to the new platforms. This is one part of the reorganization that we have spoken about is the retooling, so that we're efficient with our time and spending less time getting information and more time analyzing and getting the output and making decisions. So this is one important corner post in the agency's next 5 to 10 year approach. So just want to keep things in context. This is a really big, exciting one.
Yes.
So.
Other questions? Then is somebody willing to offer a motion to approve resolution 19-01-06?
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second, any further discussion? Hearing none then, all those in favor of the motion to approve resolution 19-01-06 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Again, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much, and I agree with Director Bauman that the process was very thorough, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The last resolution then we have before we get to our ordinance is Resolution 19-01-07, which is authorizing a contract with Jacobs Engineering Group, Inc. For design services for Blue Line Station Rehabilitation Program. Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, the authorization of this contract advances our plans to rehabilitate some of the oldest MAX stations in our system on the Blue Line. Some of the stations were built back to 1986. They've served us well for, in fact, over 30 years, but the work is necessary to bring them up to a state of good repair. Often we focus on the growth of the system, but we have to take care of the basics to keep it running well. We also need to modernize them to meet current safety, security, and aesthetic standards. As time evolves, so do the standards. Under this contract, up to 6 MAX stations between East Portland and Gresham would be renovated, and they would include those East 102nd, 172nd, 181st, the Ruby Junction 197th location, Gresham Central Transit Center, and Cleveland, which is our most eastern MAX location. We estimate 1 to 2 MAX stations will be completed per year of the contract, depending on funding. We're trying to balance the logistical needs of how do you run the railway while you rebuild it, if you will. TriMet conducted a competitive qualifications-based RFP process for this project, and we received 3 proposals in response. An evaluation committee of our internal staff, engineering, construction, transit equity departments, for example, reviewed and scored the proposals and conducted interviews with competitive candidates before identifying Jacobs as the highest ranked proposer. Of course, negotiations then ensued, and staff determined Jacobs' rates were fair and reasonable in relation to the marketplace and the type of work that was required and the expertise, particularly working around a live railway. The resolution authorized an award in the amount not to exceed $1.92 million over the 5-year period, and the negotiated contract would comment also falls within the budget for this work. It's also covered under the annual capital budgets, capital projects budget. Jacobs, if you're not familiar, is an international firm. Its headquarters are in Dallas, Texas, and has over 400 satellite locations, including one here in Portland. Their workforce is 23% women and 13% minority, and they have made a commitment to utilize certified firms for approximately 23% of the work in the areas particularly of structural engineering and lighting design. Your approval of this is recommended. And I don't know if Steve Witter is here or not, in case there's any technical questions you might have on the engineering front.
I'll be recusing myself from this vote. I have a relative that is employed by Jacobs.
I'm sorry, so you want to ask that question?
So, Jacobs, are they the organization that acquired CH2?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
That's correct.
And CH2 has done considerable work for us historically.
Correct.
Good. Other questions, comments? Seeing none then, is there a motion to approve Resolution 19-01-07?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think Director Edwards was a second on that one. So any further discussion? All right, hearing none then, all in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 19-01-07, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
One.
Okay, motion is approved. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we are done with our resolutions, and we'll move on to Ordinance 352. If I could ask the General Counsel to read this ordinance by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Ordinance number 352 of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon, amending Chapter 14 of the TriMet Code to revise the definition of net earnings from self-employment. This is the second reading.
And with that, Mr. General Manager, you have some comments about this, or?
And nothing to add on this one at this time.
So, very quickly, my understanding, this is our annual ordinance adjustment to make sure our definitions of net earnings complies with what the federal rules from IRS are doing, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think it's fairly straightforward. Is there any questions or comments by the board? Okay, hearing none, I think first off, do we need a motion? We need a motion, right, to approve the ordinance. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 352?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second.
Second.
Second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then we need to do a roll call vote, and if I could ask the General Counsel to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. Director Edwards.
Yes.
Director Simmons.
Aye.
Director Warner.
Aye.
Director Stovall.
Aye.
Director Bauman.
Aye.
The motion to approve Ordinance 352 passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes everything that I see on the business meeting today. Is there anything else from board or staff that we missed on the business meeting? Seeing none, then, I'm going to adjourn our business meeting, and I think we need a break before we come to our briefing agenda, and we've got a couple things on the briefing agenda that I think will probably be worthwhile for us to spend the time. So let's try to get back here in 10 minutes. How's that sound? All right.
Yeah, we'll have Kelly do us all a tutorial.
Risk Registry? All right.
It's not uncommon, some of you may have different experience with risk registries, and we use them quite extensively, particularly for larger capital projects in TriMet. What we're in the process of implementing here right now is a corporate risk registry for all items related to corporate, not just risks within an engineering or a specific project. And we want to use this to feed into our budget cycle, and as we would bring before you each year as one of the variables. And so the first, Andrew's going to walk you through some information here. The first part is, I'll call somewhat abstract around the concept of risk, knowing that different board members have different exposure to this. And then we'll share with you some of the details of the types of items that management has been identifying, and would also welcome your viewpoints on things we may have omitted, things to include, or other recommendations going forward. So with that, Andrew's been just a great champion on this, and over to you, Andrew.
All right, thanks, Doug. Thanks, President Warner and members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about a risk register. I think Doug mentioned you may have some familiarity with other types of risk registers. You see them a lot in FTA projects. Different organizations have developed them. It's been fun to be a part of a process of applying some more strategy and some sort of systematic approaches to how we address risk at TriMet. So I think we'll get started. So just by way of background, the TriMet executive team has recently begun to develop an enterprise risk register. I'll say we're in the initial phases, kind of the risk identification process at this point. And a risk register is a tool that helps categorize and evaluate risks to appropriately mitigate or set up mitigation plans and assign risk owners to the risks that we identify, which is a key piece of a risk register. We really want to try to apply that ownership to the things that are identified. Several examples of enterprise risks have already been identified by TriMet leadership, and as Doug alluded to earlier, that'll be kind of in the end of this short presentation on risk registers. We'll actually get into some of the details that the team has already been able to identify. So moving along, I'm going to take you through in this presentation just a real high-level view of the elements of a risk register. First, risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, and risk treatment or mitigation strategies. Those are kind of the key pieces of a good risk register, and that's what we're working through. When we talk about risk identification, it's important to kind of recognize the elements and types of risks that are available. And when we're talking about this at the enterprise level, we're looking at financial risks, reputational risks, safety risks, strategic and resiliency risks. So it's not just a sort of safety concept when we talk about risk, but there's broader implications. And when we talk about risk analysis, we're obviously talking about likelihood versus severity. And that's kind of how the key piece of being able to actually identify and analyze how much exposure you have to any risks is the likelihood of that risk developing, and then of course the ultimate impact or severity of that risk if it did develop. So I put together a couple slides. This is generally kind of the heat map that you'll see associated with the risk registry. You have a severity versus a likelihood column. Everything in the top right is something that's, you need to be very aware of and have a mitigation plan on. Things in the bottom left might not be as important because they're less likely to develop and, of course, have less severity if they did. So, and one of the elements that the team that we were part of in developing how we're going to assess risk here at TriMet, we broke out by division that impact model. So if you look at the likelihood here on this slide is on the far left, and then the severity or the impact is broken out by the different divisions of our agency on a 1 to 5 scale. So that's how we kind of came up with our prioritization. The next step in a risk register is a risk evaluation piece, and that's qualitative analysis that needs to be done around what risks need to be prioritized. And you continue analysis of the prioritized risks with subject matter experts. So, once you've flagged up these risks, you're going to really do a deep dive into those areas and make sure you have a very good understanding. You're going to compare the results of the risk analysis with established risk criteria and update risk register if key conditions change. So the last piece is really where the meat of this project is the risk mitigation. So once you've analyzed, identified the risks, understand their severity and impact, and you have that kind of top tier of risks, which we'll talk about some of them here that we've identified already, you're going to set up appropriate treatment strategies and set up mitigation strategies to try to reduce those risks. And you're going to review potential treatment options specific to each identified risk, and obviously assign owners, which another really good piece to a risk register is that somebody walks away with some ownership responsibilities on this, and that's identified. And then develop and agree upon follow-up expectations so they can be reevaluated and reassessed. So some of the key risks we've already identified that are in kind of the top tier, and I'm going to show you how this shows on the heat map. And again, I want to just say again that we're kind of in the initial phases of identifying agency risks that have enterprise impact. But we've noted that competition from other modes of transportation, steel bridge lift failures, lack of resiliency plans for the restoration of our system in the wake of a catastrophic event, large-scale cyber attack, and reliance upon third-party management of critical agency infrastructure. And if you look at the next slide, you can kind of see how this gets set up in the heat map. And we have different risks that are in this. This obviously isn't exhaustive. We only have 5 up there. But this is kind of some of the more prioritized risks that we've identified thus far. And you can see kind of out of the department area where these risks derived, whether that's public affairs or maintenance. And you can see, again, where kind of these ones, why they have priority is they're in that sort of top right quadrant of the heat map. So these are things that we're looking at. So some goals for 2019, as we're getting started, is that we enterprise risks are identified and evaluated by senior leadership. We're kind of in that process right now and identifying kind of everything's up for debate and discussion amongst the executive team in terms of what needs priority and what has high likelihood and high severity implications. And then eventually move into establishing some risk treatment plans, and that we assign ownership of the specific risks as we identify those prioritized risks. And as Doug alluded to earlier, we want to ensure that the risk register is used to help inform the business planning and budgeting process to make sure that we got the appropriate resources attached to the appropriate risks, that sort of thing. And that really concludes my presentation, kind of a short introduction into a risk register. I wanted to open up for questions.
Yeah, I might just add to this a couple things. One is for organizations that are heavily capitalized like ourselves, and when you have thousands of employees, there's a cultural side I found to corporate risk registries. And for example, it's also not identifying just the big ones that you've seen a list here on, but also identifying ones that may be really important, but making sure the risk is identified and managed and accountable at the right level in the company. So sometimes the big ones, we think somebody is truing the wheels on the trains. Well, we need to make sure those risks are identified and who would own those as an example. But those small ones could end up becoming really big ones if they're not identified right. So there's a cultural side, and I find in the role I'm in, a due diligence side that we got to unbundle the right types of risks and are they being dealt with in the right parts of the organization as well. And that helps people put together and cross-check, are we putting right resources at right levels to solve right problems and making sure the right investments go with them as well. So it's not always the big ones. And because one risk, you can go to Union Carbide, Bhopal, India many years ago. One valve in Bhopal, India wiped out a whole company. You can look at the Exxon Valdez. One terminal can take out an organization. So it's managing big risks in addition to the the details of the right culture in the right place. So, so this is a cultural part of check and balance on all of us in management to feed the right systems, the right funding and support. So, again, we're at the early stages of this, and we've also looked at this not just on what does TriMet have direct ownership of, but our ability to continue business with our partners. So if our fiber optic, for example, is current and up to speed, but as the neurons of information travel across it to a partner, maybe that's got a 50-year-old fiber piece that's broken, we're not going very far. So it's part of making sure that we have the right conversations internally as well as externally to allow the continuity of the business to occur. And it's not to pick up, if we have you see the steel bridge up here, we can have the steel bridge go down on a daily basis. These are ones where our ability to recover may take days, weeks, months, years. And so sometimes the short ones you don't want, and we have good recoveries in place called bus bridges and things, but if the steel bridge goes down because it gets taken out, that's a different conversation of resiliency. So we're kind of looking at things over impact and magnitude when you see the word severity, not just incident type, because some might be small as well. So. So with that, happen to open up any thoughts, reactions you have, anything you think we're missing, we sure welcome that.
Director Edwards?
Well, thank you for that presentation. I just wanted to have a question about collaboration and communication, and because I'm sure there's going to be some overlap in that risk, and so how often would the different risk owners meet or collaborate to work together?
Yeah, and the ownership, while it might derive from a specific area, there might be teams that are established where that crosses. Is a great point. A lot of these risks have kind of a cascading effect into other departments, and also have kind of ownership that's shared between departments. So some of those groups will be set up kind of multi-divisional. And to Doug's point, one of the key advantages of this is this just kind of elevates the conversation about risk throughout the agency as you end up talking to different folks, and you talk about likelihood, you talk about severity. There's been a real good side benefit just to having a good discussion on risk at TriMet.
Thank you.
So this is kind of nitpicking of the words, but maybe competition from other modes of transportation. I think that's probably right now, the way when you think about it as a risk. There's one where I think there's an opportunity, and maybe one of the ways you mitigate or deal with this, at least in my mind, is figure out how we have all of these pieces work together in a synergistic way that's beneficial for everybody, And so there's an example, one conversation we had this morning at the Finance and Audit Committee about kind of where are we going in the future. I mean, that's a big one. So it's a risk, but it's also, boy, this is really getting into the future and how we want to work with these folks and partner up in ways we've never even envisioned before. So have at it. I'm looking forward to what you come up with on that one.
Agreed. Well, I think to your point is, I'll call it the last mile. The last mile, I think, has, with the Ubers and the Lyfts and whoever else is going to be out there in the future, tremendous opportunity for us to synergize, even create relationships we've not even had before. On the other side, it's not unlike a freight railway where you sometimes compete together and sometimes you work together. So it's knowing those environments when you can make a greater whole together, and I think we're really wired into that as a integrated mobility agency, not just a transit authority. But I also think we have to be cautious when others are maybe using their position to take advantage of. It's like even sharing data information right now. So I think you're quite right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next up is Bernie, who's going to give us an update, particularly coming to the board, I think February, Bernie?
Yes.
And particularly around STF formula fundings, the STIF funding, and other things. So over to you.
President Warner, members of the board, Bernie Bottomley, and with me is Vanessa Visser, who is our maven of all things related to the STF. And I'll just take a second to de-obfuscate the acronyms. So you acted recently on the STIF, which is the payroll tax program that came out of House Bill 2017. So that's STIF. We have a different program, which is STF, which is revenue that comes to the region from the state from a tax on cigarettes and on fuel that's consumed in lawnmowers, as well as an occasional contribution from the general fund that is at the discretion of the legislature.
It's more than lawnmowers, just so you know. It's anything that's not a motor vehicle.
That's true. We call it the lawnmower fund. Yeah. So those funds come to the region specifically for elderly and disabled programs. Unlike STIF, which is for general transportation and can be used for elderly and disabled, STF is exclusively for programs that support elderly and disabled transportation. There's another similarity between those two programs besides their acronyms, and that is that TriMet serves as the regional convener and broker of the decision-making process for how those funds are allocated. So Vanessa is the staff person who calls together all of the programs that seek and use elderly and disabled funding, and then she runs the process of building consensus among those users. And it's traditionally a very good non-confrontational, cooperative consensus building process. And so she's going to talk about how that process works and how the recommendation for similar to STIF, in this case, the TriMet board acts as the regional decision-making body on behalf of all those users.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just add a little bit more to what Bernie said, but basically TriMet is the STF agency for the region, and we are staffed with working with a committee to help go through a grant solicitation process to award funds. And there are about 27 members on that committee that are made up of residents, riders, county staff, providers, and several CAP members. So it's a great group of people to help with the decision-making around these funds. And the most recent committee was appointed by you all in October. But so basically there are 3 grants available right now for people to apply for. And I just want to run through those really quickly. Bernie mentioned one of them is the Special Transportation Fund. It's the STF Formula Fund. And ODOT is had estimated there might be about $8.6 million available. And as he alluded to, the governor had included in the past general fund to kind of make up for the decline in taxes for that fund. And so after those original estimates were released, the governor's proposed budget does not have any STF fund in it, so we're preparing for a 40% reduction in those funds. Another funding source grant that's currently available is FTA's Section 5310 fund, and there's about $7.5 million available right now. And similar to the STF funds, projects that are eligible are capital and operations for transportation services for seniors and people with disabilities, and public and private nonprofit organizations are eligible to apply. And the third grant that's currently available is through the STIF funds. The committee that TriMet worked with set aside funding specific for seniors and people with disabilities. So there's about $2.5 million available currently for that. That funding needs to be used for the expansion and improvement of services, and it needs to be used within TriMet's district. So overall, let's see, there's about $18.6 million available in funding right now between the 3 different grants. And on January 11th, we received about 53 applications from 16 different applicants, and they requested about $22 million in funding for their projects. The STFAC is evaluating these applications, so they'll make a recommendation to the board on February 8th, and then the resolution will come to you on February 27th for you to consider. And then ultimately, the funds would be dispersed in July. So that's an overview. Are there any questions, concerns?
Questions?
Could you give us the number that you think might be available in light of the 40% reduction?
Yes.
You
I
gave it to
think
us.
it might be about 15 million available between the 3 grants.
And how does that compare to previously?
So would be about, I think, well, basically the last biennium, there was the same amount of funding available. It didn't really increase from prior to the 40% reduction. So with the, I don't know if I'm making that clear.
I'm trying to understand how the 15 million potentially available compares to what was available in the last biennium.
I think it's about a 40% decrease because it's basically the same amount of funding that was
Yeah, so if you think
available.
about this, the state funding is $10 million a biennium.
Okay.
That's the general fund contribution.
Okay.
And that's discretionary. The governor has proposed in her budget to eliminate that. So that's $5 million a year. The region gets roughly 40% of that on average.
Okay.
So we would expect to see a reduction in the $1.5 to $2 million per year range if her budget proposal is adopted by the legislature. There are years when the governor has not proposed that funding, and we've gone to the legislature and gotten them to agree to plus it up. It's going to be a hard sell this session because of the passage of House Bill 2017.
Okay.
So the legislators are going to look at that and say, hey, we did the payroll tax. You should figure out how to do this from the payroll tax. Unfortunately, the process for allocating the House Bill 2017 funds happened before the governor announced that she was not going to submit these funds. So we've already committed those funds elsewhere, except for the $1 million that was mentioned.
So let me see if I've got this correctly. So from last year to this upcoming grant cycle, the amount of monies that were allocated to this program from the 2017, House Bill 2017, the STIF money, makes it about a wash for what it is from the past year.
We'll still be a little down.
We'll still be a little
not
down, but
quite
it's close.
It's probably, we're still $1 million a year short of where we've been.
But that's what's really blunting a lot of the impact of the cut that's being proposed.
And that's further complicated by the fact that House Bill 2017 funds can't be used to backfill the loss of revenue elsewhere. So we're still working with ODOT to try to get an interpretation of that allows
We have to
us
let it cut the service for a day and
and then
back
bring it back. Yeah, we're trying to avoid that sort of thing.
I'm sorry, I didn't suggest that. I really didn't. Other questions by the board?
Help me, just one more. Help me to understand why there are more applications than there are applicants.
Because they're eligible, they could apply for multiple funding sources. So we have applications for each of the 3 funds available.
And they also apply for different services
I'll have to read
from the same pot. So that they might apply for, a senior center shuttle and for a rider training program. So,
complicated.
So it's fair to say it'll be a little more contentious as the pot is smaller.
Yes.
I think it will be. TriMet also itself retains some of these funds for LIFT program and related services. We'll be under pressure to not consume as much of this resource as we have in the past.
Okay, so this is a heads up, and when is the decisions made on this again?
You'll get a resolution for the February 27th board
The
meeting.
next board meeting.
So it's actually coming next meeting, okay.
Correct.
Thanks for the warning.
So,
And this background's helpful. I'll just have to read it.
So unless there's any other questions, that would conclude the briefing, the two briefings for this morning, or other topics.
I don't have anything else. Anything else? Questions? Good job. I didn't
Wow.
quite, I think
No,
we're very
that's-
close to Travis's
I think you beat
endpoint
me.
last by,
Yeah.
by 2 minutes,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, wow.
You can drop the mic now.
All right, thank you. I think we're done. Thank you all. That was a good meeting.
Thank you.
Like a discussion. That's a big.